I'm Christopher Warnock of Renaissance Astrology, and I had a Horary student asking me some questions about turned houses. So I thought I would go ahead and do a video about turned houses and if you see the chart, if you can actually sort of physically see it, I think in a lot of cases it makes it easy to understand. So really, what are turned houses? So basically, when we're doing a horary question, you can see the cursor here. Normally, we're going to be the querent, the person who's asking the question. They're always represented by the first house. So when we look at the rest of the chart, it's all oriented in relation to the person asking the question. So, for example, the first house is the querent. If you're asking about, say, like for example, changing your name or your health, we're going to look at the first house. If we're asking about your money, it's second house. Third house would be your neighbors and commuting, short-term journeys for you. Fourth house would be your family, also your father, and your home. Fifth house, your children, and etc. through the rest of the houses. So the key with this is that we're all always looking at it from the perspective of the querent in a standard chart. Now, if you have, it's very typical for people to come and say, I'm worried about my daughter. I want to know if she's going to get married. That's typical. And so in those situations, what I do is I say, well, does your daughter know about that you're asking the question? Are you essentially doing it on behalf of her? Now, I'm fine either way. Something like that, I think people care about their children. They want to help them. That's fine to ask without them knowing. I don't have an ethical problem with that. It's more of a technical problem because if the child says yes or someone else says, yeah, I know you know an astrologer, could you ask on behalf of me? Then the person who really is getting the answer is the querent. We don't have to worry about in a sense, the person who's coming to is the messenger because they're just passing on the question or the query. But if they're asking without the person's knowledge, then we need to start thinking about turning the chart. So in that case, the querent would be the first house, but her daughter would be the fifth house. Okay, this is the fifth house. So then what we're going to need to do is turn the chart. So we then look at the chart from the perspective of the daughter, right? So the fifth house then becomes her ascendant, right? And so then, like as I said, that same sequence goes in place. So she's her first house is the fifth, right? What we call the radix. Now, when we start doing turned houses, we talk about the radix and the turned house. The radix is the original chart, the root chart. Radix means root in Latin, and the turned houses are then as we move around. Okay, so it's the radix fifth, turned first of the querent. Of the daughter. So then the daughter's money would be 1, 2, right? Second house from the fifth is the sixth. And then so the husband or relationship of the daughter would be 7 houses away. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So the daughter's romantic partner or husband would be her turn 7th would be the radix 11th house. Okay. So one of the important things you want to realize is that when you're counting, you count 1 for the house you start with, and then the next house is 2. Okay, that's really key because if you start counting this, if you start daughter is 0 and the next house is 1, then you're going to be off. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so let's look at some examples of this. So let's say your cat's sister. Okay, so a cat is a small animal, so you can't ride it. So it's the 6th house, and then a sister would be 3. So it's the turned third. Okay, so 1, 2, 3. So it's the radix 8th, turned third of the cat. Okay, so then your secret. Let's see, your father's money. Okay, so 4th is father. Okay, and money is 2, so 1, 2. So it's the radix 5th, turn 2nd house of the father. Okay, and here's another one. Secret enemy's mother. Okay, secret enemies are 12th. Okay, mother is 10th, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, so the secret enemy's mother is the radix 9th, and that's the turned the turn 10th from the 12th. Okay, let's just do one more. Teacher's sun. Okay, so teacher is 9th, sun is 5th. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's the radix ascendant, turn 5th house from the teacher's 9th. So as you can see, it's a little complicated, but once you set the steps down and then you understand how to count, it's fairly clear. Now, another thing you can do with this is you can do multiple turnings. So, if you had your, for example, a nephew, you could do that as third because it's a relative, not immediate family. But another way is to say nephew would be my brother's son. So you say a brother is 1, 2, 3, right? And then son is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's another way of doing it. Is the nephew is you think of them as a brother's son, and then you can do it. Now, what you want to be careful of in general is it's really best not to turn the chart. If someone comes to you and says, my daughter was getting married, it's like it is easier from a technical standpoint to have the daughter know about it, and then you can just use the daughter as the first house, as the querent. And also when you're doing these multiple turnings, it sounds cool, but it becomes confusing after a while and too many turnings. If you get too far away from the querent, then you lose the emotional intensity. If it's my brother's hairdresser's nephew's son, then it's so far away in terms of an emotional connection that you don't get really a very good chart with it. The other problem with turn charts in general is that in order to interpret these, you need to use a mix typically of turn and radix charts. So for example, one of the more famous examples that I've had in my experience is someone was asking about their son's prison sentence. So the querent would be the 1st, son would be the 5th, and then the prosecutor is the 7th. So from the son, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the 11th. However, in that case, I use the 10th house, the radix 10th, the original 10th for the judge, rather than turning the chart because it's the judge for everybody. But that's kind of just idiosyncratic. I mean, you could logically turn the entire chart, or you could say the prosecutor was the radix 7th. So this is the problem with turn charts. And then you have too many significators. You got radix significators, turn significators. So what I would say about turn charts is it's something you want to use. It's sort of like hot sauce. You don't want to use it indiscriminately. And you want to be careful about using turn charts. As much as possible, use the radix chart and get the querent, the original querent, the person who's actually asking the question to be the querent rather than someone doing it without their knowledge. If necessary, though, and there's plenty of situations, like I said, if you're asking about your daughter getting married, you care about that, you have an emotional connection, and those are valid charts. So I hope that's sort of illuminating on the issue of turned houses, in horary in particular, and I hope that people will find that useful and help them to understand the use of turn charts.